where you stream to watch that, watch this, and I'll dive down through this hairy flesh.
Hi, and welcome to Watch This. I'm CJ Johnson, and this week I am rejoined by Jim Flanagan. He's a Ben Wheatley enthusiast, and the two of us are going to look at the career of Ben Wheatley in relation to his latest film, Free Fire.
I'm on the proud tonight. Singing beyond, I'll have my fun. I can chew anything I bite.
Free Fire is Ben Wheatley's sixth film. It's currently screening in cinemas worldwide. Basically, the idea of the film is this. What if an action film stopped at its first action sequence and let that action sequence play for the rest of the film? In this case, an arms deal in a warehouse goes wrong about 20 minutes in. And for the rest of the film, we simply see the shootout that results, rather than the many, many other scenes that theoretically should have come after the shootout. It's all set in the 1970s. It's got groovy actors looking groovy, and Jim's here to talk about it with me. Hi, Jim.
CJ, how are you?
Good. So, after High Rise, I thought we'd have to wait a while for a new Ben Wheatley film, but then bingo, like 6 months later, we get a new one.
Yeah, and interesting, I remember when we talked about High Rise on the radio last year, they had just announced this film, and in fact, Ben Wheatley had announced that he was just polishing off post and that it was going to be premiered at Toronto, I think, in the following October, which is about 3 months after we first discussed it. So he nearly finished it by the time, admittedly, Australia got the vastly delayed release of High Rise. So yeah, he doesn't mess about, Mr. Wheatley. He churns them out. He's
churning them out, which we'll have to talk about, because I'm worried he's churning them out a little too quickly.
So am I. And it's kind of interesting the way that you prefaced our discussion, because I'm definitely a really, really big Ben Wheatley fan. But much more so, I think I can say with confidence now, the first half of his career thus far than the second half. And I have some concerns about what he's doing.
Me too. And I'm even questioning myself because, like, I guess I first saw Kill List.
Yeah, that was the first Ben Wheatley film I saw as well. And I guess that was, that was the first one that really made international
because
waves.
Barely anyone saw Down Terrace except
and
film
sightseers.
festivals.
Yeah.
And so I first saw Kill List, and it thrilled me so much that I guess in my brain I did something that I've now become a bit critical of myself of, which is I instantly elevated him to like, oh, I'm going to love everything this guy ever does status. Yeah. And I'm realizing now that everyone is fallible.
Yeah, and I did something similar, and I saw Kill List, and I loved it, and I looped back and then did Sightseers and Down Terrace, and loved them just as much as Kill List. I haven't loved anything he's done with the last three films since then nearly as much, actually. I think A Field in England is pretty impenetrable.
A Field in England is essentially unwatchable. I watched it because I was determined to watch Ben Wheatley's films, but it is really, really... It is. It's just so abstract as to be annoying.
Yeah, and I thought, and you and I talked about High Rise last year, I thought High Rise was a really interesting, beautifully made failure, basically.
Me too.
That just collapsed in a kind of second-rate Ken Russell kind of heap in the second half, and I was really disappointed with that. And look, and I was really surprised by this film. When I first read that Ben Wheatley was making this sort of hard-boiled, pure, one-set actioner, I was anticipating a sort of chamber Black Hawk Down, and not this sort of sub-Tarantino, middling, kind of caper actioner gore fest, which is large. I enjoyed this film, but I was surprised at how unambitious it was, and I partially agree with you that he's trying this sort of formal experiment in that effectively we have this sort of 25 minute setup and then one action set piece that goes for what, north of an hour.
Yeah, the whole film is exactly 90 minutes.
Yeah,
which he is very intentional.
Yep.
And at one point, a character says something like, I think one character calls out to another, when do you think the cops will arrive? And he's like, how long have we been fighting? He's like, I don't know, 10 minutes. He's like, well, in about 80 minutes or something.
Yeah.
You know, they
playing
reference
all sorts.
it.
Absolutely, he's playing all sorts of games with the audience and the kind of known trappings of the various genres that he's referencing.
So I reckon the first bullet is probably fired about 25 minutes in. So I think the gunfight is about about 65 minutes long.
Yes, it is. It
Or
is.
with credits, I reckon it's probably an hour. I bet you the gunfight is probably an hour.
And it's a really, really meticulously well-staged gunfight, and it has a really fantastic POV. It has a great point of view, I think.
Yeah. And good sound design.
Oh, and he has a fantastic use of music. He always does. The sort of use of ABBA and Bowie in High Rise, and the use of John Denver
in this one, I know.
It's really clever and really subversive, and there's some really interesting sound design and incidental music as well. But I had to slap myself a few times during this film that this was the same filmmaker that had made Kill List and A Field in England.
Yeah.
That was me anyway.
I loved the 25-minute setup. I loved it.
Yeah, so did I.
Because all of these characters, I mean, you've got Michael Smiley, who has been in all of them.
Yep.
You've got Cillian Murphy. You've got Sharlto Copley giving his best performance ever in the best role in the film, admittedly.
Yeah, he's fun, but I really like Sharlto Copley, and I like seeing him get really good work again.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of diminished returns since then, so I like seeing him getting a meaty
He's
role.
hard to cast.
Yeah, he is. But I still feel that and this is a really, really good ensemble cast.
Yeah.
And I really, really love Jack Raynor in this, who was the older brother in Sing Street that I know you and I had some argy about, but he's great in that, and I really, really like him in this. And so it's a really, really good ensemble cast. They're all largely working well within their comfort zone, I think, including Sharlto Copley for me.
Yeah.
He's good.
Well, he gets to do his South African accent, and a lot of his humour is from the fact that he speaks in the South African accent.
Yeah,
like
and
it's
kind
accent humour a little
It's still
bit.
kind of a one-note performance, I think. It's really, really fun.
Well, none of these characters can have more than a one-note performance, really, because there's no real depth to them. As I was saying, I guess I really liked the first 25 minutes, but I was totally, completely, always also understanding that it felt in the wake of Tarantino. Like it really, the first 25 minutes really feel, like you can really feel Tarantino's existence, previous existence on it. You know, without Tarantino, I don't think this film or even Ben Wheatley would exist.
No.
And it's almost like he's paying homage in the first 25 minutes. It's almost like he's saying, like, yep, this is my take on Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, I was going to say Reservoir Dogs in particular, and I kind of felt the Tarantino vibe a lot stronger in the second half as the characters get more and more cut up and bullet-riddled and covered in dust and grit from the warehouse. And in all honesty, around the kind of 55, 60-minute mark, I started to switch off with this. I just didn't really give a crap about what was happening.
That's my problem with it, is that I drifted. I got to admit that about the same mark, 55 minutes, 60 minutes, I drifted, and I was like, what am I waiting for now? 'Cause really, now that we know that we're not going anywhere, now that we know that the whole point is let's see if we can do a film that is a gunfight. Yeah. All I'm kind of staying for is to figure out who stays alive.
Well, that's exactly right. And once you work out what the trick is and what he's doing, so we have this really I agree, this is really quite nice slow build exposition of 25 minutes.
That's funny, that's witty.
It's great, it's fun. And then the bullets start flying, and then after about 25 minutes of that, as an audience, you sort of click, okay, this is the film. Yeah. This is the rest of the film, and I sort of read in the notes beforehand that it's 90 minutes. This is all I've got. I was just done largely by about the 60. He just plays his cards too early, I think. And it's, again, it's just too small a film to hold your interest for that long. You know, it's this sort of experimental but still very straightforward genre exercise, essentially, I think.
It's like he needed to scratch the itch. He said to himself, wonder if I could do this. And he's gone for it. And it hasn't really worked. And so it's kind of good, but like I'm not sure that I could recommend sitting through it.
No, I mean, it works. It's just not a very big or very interesting film. And that's sort of my concern with Ben Wheatley. And I think especially 2 or 3 years ago, and I think just before the release of High Rise, people were talking about sort of 4 big preeminent British independent filmmakers. So I think, you know, Ben Wheatley, Peter Strickland, Andrea Arnold, and Jonathan Glazer, Under the Skin. I think Ben Wheatley is really at risk against those other 3 now after High Rise and this, I would argue.
Especially with this one, because, I mean, High Rise had people who loved it and people who hated it. And that's a good place to be as an auteur, is to polarize people. But this one, it's much more, like we're saying, the reviews have been much more middle of the road. It's like, it's okay, I could recommend it, it's entertaining, but it's not great. But also, he has suggested in his copious interviews that he does
yeah.
that he never, I don't think he ever acknowledges Tarantino, by the way. He always says that this is exactly as I described it, that it's, imagine that this is the first action movie in a film, action scene in an action movie that's meant to have a lot.
Yeah,
It's meant to essentially be about Armie Hammer and Brie Larson's characters as they continue on. And then it's like, but what if it doesn't continue on? And so he has said in these interviews that it was quite easy to get this one financed because it was assumed it would have commercial viability. And I think it is kind of tanking all over the world. And so if this is his commercial film and it's not doing well, then he's in a weird place because it's moving away from his art house aesthetic.
I completely agree, and you've sort of hit on something that I thought a lot about after I saw it, and in that I think this is a film that's largely stuck in no man's land. It is ostensibly a genre film, right? Genre films are overwhelmingly pre-made for a custom inbuilt wide audience.
Yep.
It's not a genre film that has the studio backing or the cast or the hardcore on ingenuity to reach a wide audience or the financial backing to do that.
Yeah.
And yet, as a Ben Wheatley film, it's not auteurist and innovative and experimental and interesting enough to do the festival circuit or really function successfully as an auteurist piece of cinema. It's sort of stuck uncomfortably between the two, I think, in kind of no man's land. And when the session that I saw, that was really obvious.
Right, you're right, because like the technical wizardry of the actual logistics of the gunfight needed to be jaw-dropping. Like The Raid, for example. And it's not.
I much prefer The Raid as a film.
Yeah, well, because The Raid, people are like, what?
Yeah.
And you're not getting that in this.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, I wanted the character stuff to, in retrospect, I wish that had gone on the whole film, not the gunfight, because I didn't get what I was expecting of the gunfight, which is the best gunfight of all time, because it's not.
The Raid is a really interesting comparison, actually, because The Raid to me is a
very similar.
It is a very similar film, and Raid 2 as well. They're both ostensibly
in concept.
Yeah, absolutely. They're both largely one continuous action
real-time action
absolutely.
sequence.
Black Hawk Down is as well. So it's not like there's anything terribly new in what he's done with that. I think The Raid, as a purest piece of kind of pulp genre cinema, is actually a much more successful film than this is, and a lot less pretentious in some of the trappings around it. So I'm a little confused as to what he was trying to pull off with this film. Personally.
Me too. It's like he simultaneously wrote a movie that he could get a $10 million for, which is the budget, very quickly, but he still gave himself a Ben Wheatley challenge.
Yeah,
and so it's like confused.
Yeah, no, they only cost 10 mil. Wow, that's kind of a miracle. And
which meant that all these people worked for pretty cheap, because there's a lot of them.
Yeah, there are.
So you can imagine, I mean, even if they only got $100,000 each, that adds up to
up quickly.
One of those million very quickly.
It's an ensemble cast.
Brie Larson signed on before she got her Oscar. That's how she's in here. Because you can't afford an Oscar winner on $10 million.
Well, look, it's a really great ensemble cast, and no one's bad in it. I just think they're all working well within their comfort zone.
Should we just mention Armie Hammer? I think he's terrific in it. Yeah. I saw him, I loved him in The Social Network, but everything since, he hasn't made an impression on me. And in this, I was like, okay, Armie Hammer, you are a nice big hunk of screen magnitude.
Actually, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that until now. I normally find him pretty anodyne and kind of nothing, including in Nocturnal Animals. I did really like him in this. It's much more interesting.
I can't even remember him in Nocturnal Animals.
He doesn't have much to do. He's the most interesting character in this, actually. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, he is good.
Hopefully he can press on and do
He's
something
very
more
funny in kind of a hard role, you know. Yeah, because he's got to be funny by being cool.
Yeah.
And that's tough.
And he's not just working off his sort of prettiness in this. It's a little tough. It's a little rougher around the edges than that. He's good. Yeah.
And unfortunately, Oscar winner Brie Larson, like in Kong Skull Island, does not get much to do here.
No, she doesn't. It's a little uncomfortable how little she gets to do.
It's kind of like it really becomes the token chick, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and they very late in the day attempt to, without kind of spoiling anything, and there's not much of a plot to spoil, but they very late in the day try to attempt some sort of subversion of her role with the boys, but it's not much.
Yeah. Now, going back to Down Terrace, his first film, his first feature film, made for 8 days, made for so little money that it's
Yeah.
pointless even talking about a budget. Like officially on IMDb, it's $30,000.
Good God.
But really,
Yeah.
you're basically talking about a film that cost nothing because everyone did favors. Everyone used the equipment from their other shoots, you know, just borrowed it, you know, for 8 days.
Yeah.
I mean, you're really talking about a handmade movie made in the house of the co-writer, made in his parents' house, starring
didn't know
his
that.
dad.
Really?
Yeah, starring his dad.
I knew his dad was in. I didn't realize it was in the house.
So Rob Hill and Robin Hill,
Good God.
you know, in Rob Hill's house, made in 8 days for nothing.
Yeah.
And that got him to Cannes and, you know, made his career. And looking at the same sort of thing, that's not in real time, but it is essentially in one location, almost.
Yeah, right, okay.
But it's got so much character depth. It is so beautifully made. It's so funny. And the two women in that, in what is also a very Boise picture, the two women have amazing roles.
Yeah, which is, well, and I really like
The wife and the mother, or the wife to be and the mother.
Well, and Kill List similarly has really strong, interesting
Female
roles as well.
Even though it's about two hitmen.
Well, and one of the things I disliked about High Rise was again the uncomfortableness of the sexual violence and the lack of really good female roles. So something.
Yeah, though that is also source material.
Yeah, that's true. That is in the book as well. That's definitely true. But yeah, no, you're right. So look, I'm just a bit. I'm a bit. I've got the Wheatley worries. I'm a little bit concerned.
I so have the Wheatley worries.
What's going on at the moment? I really haven't enjoyed terribly his last two films. Although this is like High Rise is, I think, an interesting failure.
Yeah.
But he hasn't made a really good. Ambitious piece of cinema, I think, until Kill List now. He's
Wait, what about Sightseers? Sightseers was after Kill List. You didn't like Sightseers?
No, Sightseers was before Kill List.
Nope.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
It goes Down Terrace, Kill List, Sightseers, A Field in England, High Rise, this one.
I'm gonna go with you and agree on that one. My understanding was otherwise, but I could be wrong. Let's do that. Okay. Yeah, right. That could be the
Because
chronology.
Amy Jump, his wife, enters the picture with Sightseers.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
right.
she now writes. She's
Okay,
now
well,
his writing
I
collaborator.
beg your pardon. Kill List and Sightseers. But do you
It's
you
easy
agree?
to see why you'd make that mistake because Sightseers feels much smaller than
It
Kill
does.
List.
Yeah.
And it kind of is. In a way.
Yeah. Well, it is a smaller film.
Sightseers
Yeah,
feels very handmade. Sightseers feels kind of like Down Terrace-y.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with everything you're saying.
Do you agree with that
Yeah.
though? So I think the last three films, inclusive of A Field in England, haven't worked.
Yeah. And I think
pieces of cinema.
High Rise has a very specific problem that I think could have been avoided, and it might have even happened in the edit. I don't know, because High Rise to me has a really strong first act.
Yeah, I agree.
Has a relatively okay third act.
Yeah.
And has impeccable production design and camera movement and cast and soundtrack.
Yeah.
But the second act is fucked.
Yeah, it
the
is.
The second act is a mess, and it's a montage.
Well,
it's like the second act, they either didn't script properly or they just smoked grass in the editing room and made the second act a silly montage.
I agree.
That doesn't even have temporal resonance.
But similarly to this film, High Rise becomes really repetitive in that last reel in particular, and largely the second half.
does.
As soon as the disintegration of the sort of class strata system in the building begins, it's just relentless and a bit one note. And you and I talked about this last year, and my biggest gripe with that is that if you haven't read the book, in the book, the disintegration of the social setup in the building is very meticulous, very gradual,
and
very well
linear.
paced.
Every chapter there's a new,
So you miss that. It just explodes and begins at about the 40-minute mark in the film.
Yeah.
And all of the kind of very meticulous satire of the English class system that Ballard constructs isn't there. And you're not privy to it if you haven't read the book. And I don't think it works unless you've read the book already. And to me, that's bad cinema. It needs to work on its own terms. You know, film is a different medium to literature and anything else. And I just don't think he pulled that off at all successfully in that film. I think the satire is largely missing.
I agree. So we both got introduced to Wheatley by Kill List.
Yeah.
And Kill List is definitely his masterpiece. I mean,
I
think
agree.
We have to. I mean, it's his masterpiece, and it's, to me, Kill List. So it's about two hitmen, and it's about this mysterious job. It's also about their personal lives. It's also about, their relationships with women, and then it is also a folk horror.
And yes, and that's to
it's
me,
terrifying.
That's the beauty and the genius of Kill List.
Yeah.
And I've watched Kill List 3 or 4 times now, and I'm still not quite sure what it's about and what happens in the best possible way for a film. I think it's a really open text, to use an overly academic word, that you can interpret in multiple different ways. God knows what some of the content is referring to. But what I also love about it is it's about so many different things, but it's a really, really great grab you by the throat piece of genre filmmaking as well. It's
just as a horror film, it works,
involving.
It's so terrifying.
Absolutely works as a kind of classical horror film. Yes, and that's what I love. That's what I think he harnesses in that film. So many different strains of kind of British genre filmmaking and kind of auteurist filmmaking, all running through the one film.
Yeah, and it is so art house, but it is also so accessible.
Yes.
Because it does have that visceral effect of being terrifying, and even before it's terrifying in the sort of the Hitman stuff, just being thrilling.
Yeah.
Just being suspenseful, intense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know about this open text thing with him now because I watched the commentary for Down Terrace. And so the
Wheatley commentary.
So it's the Wheatley and his co-writer Robin Hill, their commentary.
Yeah.
And what they say, and now I see it, now I realize this is how he structures all of his films, is that they wrote a cohesive narrative that all makes sense.
As in a traditional narrative
because Down Terrace is like Kill List in that it's like, by the end of it, you don't understand exactly everything, what you've seen, and yet it somehow makes sense, but you don't know everything. And what they do is they write it so that it's clear, and then they chop away at the exposition.
Right.
So they write the exposition that Hollywood gives you,
and then they
get rid of it.
Right.
So you're left with the emotional resonance of the scenes, and you're left even with the scenes, but without the exposition bits.
But it still works as a traditional narrative, I think. I was never confused in Kill List or Down Terrace or Sightseers as what was happened. I was just trying to uncouple and make up my own mind about what I'd witnessed.
Because it's there, it's just not there.
Absolutely.
It's like you're seeing the skeleton and they've removed the flesh. Like they talk about how exposition scenes are boring, they're horrible, never have exposition scenes. So where you'd normally get an exposition scene, they might even shoot it and then they'll remove it. So you've still got the fight around it. You just don't have the exposition. So you can feel the story without knowing the story.
Yeah, and I know that he's a really big Nicholas Roeg and Tarkovsky fan in particular, and I think you can really see the influence of both of them, particularly in Kill List. I think a lot of the lurid horror elements, owe a lot to Roeg, and certainly that kind of narrative approach. I know he's a real Tarkovsky geek, and he's done a lot of commentary on Tarkovsky's work.
Has he really?
So, yeah, apparently. So that also makes sense. So here's my question. I think that completely works, that approach to editing a narrative in Kill List and Down Terrace, and to a lesser extent Sightseeing. Why has he stopped doing that? Why? Because to me, part of the problem with High Rise and the film that we've just reviewed is that they're too linear. I'm sort of disappointed by how straightforward his storytelling is in both of those films. It's almost like he's made a decision to stop doing that.
Well, he has started
since
writing.
He's had access to larger budgets.
Well, he has started writing with Amy Jump, who's also become his wife.
So I've heard, yes.
And so and I think really her influence on the scripts has to be taken into account because I don't think she certainly did not write or was around, I believe, during Down Terrace.
Yeah.
And I don't think she's involved with Kill List either. So that could explain the shift.
So new writing partner.
New writing partner, huge.
Yeah.
And also maybe he's strayed a little bit, Maybe he's, he never anticipated anything for Down Terrace. They made so much stuff that they were just hoping one stuck to the wall, and one did, Down Terrace. And I'm just thinking, now that he's got, he's still an auteur, he still has Final Cut, he's managing to not sell himself out so much that he doesn't have people telling him what to do, but he must feel it. He's playing with $10 million of someone else's money, so he must feel that thing of like, I better tell him a bit more of the story.
Well, and to me, I think High Rise is a real turning point. There's a lot more pressure on a filmmaker who has just been championed over the last sort of 3 or 4 years as, one of the darlings of serious, British independent cinema. He's essentially adapting and making a film of this incredibly beloved classic English novel.
Yeah. And you and I were practically high-fiving when we found out that he was getting to do it.
Exactly, and I think a lot of, the film following, international geek world were, he's got this prestige cast, you know, with Hiddleston and Jeremy Irons and people like that.
Yeah.
There's a
Sienna
lot
Miller.
more pressure to deliver something than just a small, independently functioning auteurist that he was pre that film. So
Yeah.
I just sort of feel that his films have lessened since he's become this sort of champion of you know, British contemporary cinema in a way that someone like Jonathan Glazer didn't struggle with when he made Under the Skin.
Yeah, I agree with
Scarlett
you.
Johansson.
I agree with you, and I almost feel like, in a way, like it's almost like the second act of High Rise is a fuck you to that. Like
Yeah.
maybe he made High Rise and it all
Maybe.
sort of worked, and then he was like, and fucked up the
just-
middle section to make it more Wheatley-esque.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a 40-minute orgy sequence for the
Yeah.
second half of the film and shove that up your
And
up your coat.
A Field in England feels like, in a way, a fuck you even to the success of Sightseers and to the
Yeah.
limited success of Sightseers and Kill List. You know, it
Yeah.
almost feels like, oh my God, I'm starting to get offers. I'm going to make something. It's all A Field in England is so sort of unscratchable that it
Yeah.
almost feels like self-destructive.
Yeah, it does. But it's also incomprehensibly pretentious
Yeah.
as well, in a way that
Yeah.
his other films aren't. So I just feel like something has changed in his approach that has really lessened his impact as a filmmaker.
And also, maybe he is making things too quickly.
Yeah,
Like it feels like
churning
he's
them
getting
out.
out of film about once every 9 months at the moment,
Yeah.
and that's too quick, you know? One a year is sort of has become the universal standard,
Yeah.
you know, acceptable for a very quick career as a director.
Well, and you look at those kind of figures that we sort of mentioned earlier, you know, in the kind of British kind of prestige independent film. And, you know, Jonathan Glazer makes a film every 5 years. I know he does a lot of advertising work.
Yeah,
and
as does Wheatley.
Andrea Arnold makes one every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And Peter Strickland makes one every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So he's certainly working a lot quicker. And look, I kind of like that, you know, it's a sort of Clint Eastwood, old-fashioned Hollywood approach to, you know, you're a worker bee and you just churn out, you just work all the time. I mean, I like that approach, but he just hasn't made a good film since 2011.
Yeah. Okay, so let's rank them.
Wow. All right. Okay, hit me. Bottom of the pile.
So this is how I'm ranking them. I'm going to have to rank from the top down.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay.
I suspect we'll be the same, but maybe not. So I go Kill List.
I'm stuck. I'm torn for 2 and 3.
Oh, okay. I go Kill List, Down Terrace,
Sightseers.
Sightseers.
That has to be the top 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I've got to go. I guess I've got to go High Rise, Free Fire, Field in England.
Yeah, you know what? I hate agreeing with you, CJ, as you well
Why?
know. But you know, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think you could toss a coin between Sightseers and Down Terrace because and that and Kill List. They're just 3 fantastic films.
But I would
I
almost-
think there's daylight between those 3 and the
There
bottom
is.
3.
I agree with you. There is daylight. I would also almost recommend people see them in the order I saw them in, which was Kill List, Sightseers, Down Terrace, because Down Terrace is tricky. I think it's great, but it is tricky. Like,
Well, I mean,
you have to know the fact that it was basically shot in 8 days in someone's house.
Yeah.
You know?
yeah. Well, and so is Kill List, and Kill List is incredibly disturbing and graphic in the last half an hour.
Yeah.
Or so.
It feels bigger though.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, look, Kill List is an absolute classic.
Yeah, it is.
I just hope that he gets his mojo back quickly.
Yeah.
Because he's just at risk.
Yeah.
Currently.
He's got 2 films in pre-production on IMDb.
Do you know what they are? Because
One's called Freak Shift.
Okay. Have you read anything about that?
nope.
I haven't.
Nope.
Okay.
And one's called Untitled Ideal Project.
Interesting.
So I don't know if
Okay.
that means the working title is called Ideal or whether this is
Or
his
whether he's-
ideal project.
This is his fanboy project. Right. We will see.
Yeah. Ben Wheatley, discussed by Jim Flanagan and I, both huge fans, but both very worried. We're taking it, so you can feel we're taking it on board. You know, we've got this personal connection, and we want him to be doing better. He watches a lot of stuff. He's all over Twitter and everything. So,
Yeah,
Mr. Wheatley, if you have watched this,
Yeah. Come on, mate.
hit us up with a
Turn
good
it around.
one. We love you. But, you know, thanks very much, Jim.
Cheers, CJ.
You've been watching Watch This.
Watch that, watch this, and I'll dive down.